Hendo, thanks very much for joining us. Thanks for your time, as always. Like we said, obviously, just wanted to sit down and catch up on the 2023 season. Such a long and memorable season, really. First of all, just before we get into anything too detailed, how would you reflect on 2023 and reaching the playoffs in such a dramatic fashion? And how do you reflect on this year? You're first in charge of the Knights.
Yeah, look, I'm pretty proud of what we've achieved as a group collectively this season. I think all things considering, the fact that I was appointed late in the day, had probably a 2-week window to sort of plan pre-season, get around speaking to every single player that we had contracted at the time, scrambling to get some performance staff together as well. It probably wasn't the ideal preparation going into a pre-season campaign. Also add to the fact that we had a number of players involved in the World Cup last year too, so they had extended periods of time off post-World Cup. We had obviously a number of players that were on the treatment table and obviously a couple that we sort of discovered through our medical screening process that needed further attention as well. So, it certainly put us under a little bit of pressure, I should say, with our pre-season sort of program. We probably had on average sort of 14 to 16 players training most weeks throughout the pre-season. So, it wasn't ideal preparation going in, let's say that. So you take that into consideration. We then come into round one and, we obviously had a number of players missing that game for the first round, and then we pick up some more injuries in that first game, more notably James Cunningham on his debut for the club, and then it was a case of sort of that seemed to be the theme for the year really. We'd sort of welcome 1 or 2 players back, but lose another couple on the process, and I think for large parts of this season, we probably had on average anywhere from 7 to 10 players missing most weeks. A lot of them being our established players or our spine players as well. So it probably just restricted our opportunity to really build that cohesion and continuity and build those combinations, within the team. So I think again, I have to give a lot of credit to the playing group in terms of how they handled that adversity. The fact that not one player whinged or moaned, the fact that they weren't playing in their preferred position, they did what they had to do to the best of their ability for the team. We obviously blooded a number of young players, and a number of young players got more experience and exposure than probably what was initially intended for them this season in terms of their development plan that we had for them. I think when you factor in all those things that have sort of gone on, out of our control to a degree, I think the playing group of 2023 has to be highly commended for what they've achieved. I think it's been incredible. I think we played in the end, more games than any other team in the championship competition. I think 34 games in total. 27 league rounds, a playoff game. 5 games in the Challenge Cup. From round 3 to the quarterfinals, an 1895 Cup semi-final. So, all with a relatively young squad, so to speak. I have to give a lot of credit to the playing group. The fact that we managed to learn some lessons along the way, lessons that I was able to learn about my players too, because don't forget, as a new coach coming in, I hadn't worked with any of these players prior to my arrival. Obviously, James Cunningham and Brendan Sandy, who we recruited throughout the season, I'd worked with previously, but everybody else was new to me. So, I had to take that opportunity to get to know them and get to figure out what their motivations were, what their triggers are. So that's been part of that process this year as well. And, and I'm just really pleased that, I learned some good lessons along the way about my players. I think they've learned some good lessons too. Certainly a lot of our younger players, in terms of, playing the amount of games they did. They had learned some harsh lessons early doors, and they made some mistakes, but they were better for that. And again, I felt showed probably a level of maturity in the end, and the way they kind of, I saw much improved performances from our younger players, certainly in the final third of the season. But I also have to give a lot of credit to some of our senior and established players who, a number of them playing out of position for large parts of this year, did a tremendous job in supporting our younger players and developing them, and teaching them what it takes to win, what it looks like to win. So overall, I'm pretty pleased, certainly with the foundations that we have now built as a team this season in 2023.
You spoke there about obviously having to learn harsh lessons. Obviously, it was, we went on a pretty tricky run. I think it was 5 defeats in a row, and obviously,
Sure.
With that defeat away to Whitehaven, leaving us, I think, just above the relegation zone.
Yeah.
What were you thinking at that stage? Because obviously, from then it was such a turning point, really.
Yeah.
What was the sort of mood like in the group then? How were you feeling at that stage of the year?
Yeah, well, I never felt the group were in a place where they were, giving up, if that makes sense, or thinking, oh, how are we going to get through this? I certainly as a coach never panicked. I held my nerve. I trusted in what we were doing. In terms of our process, in terms of what we were doing at training. I believe in what we do. I believe we run a good training program. I believe we, in terms of what the ethos that we're trying to instill within this team was right. The areas of focus for us as a group this season, I believed in was right for this group, and obviously the process that we need to deliver and execute on the field as well. I believe in it. So I never deviated away from that, and my staff were on board with that, and they never either. So I think having that level of consistency was certainly important. I think maybe other coaches or at that time, or other clubs at that time, may have showed a sense of panic, may have tried to buy their way out of things, or chopped and changed a lot of things to try and reinvent the wheel. But we just stayed true to what we believed was the right path to go in. I'm also very pleased that I have an owner who I get to work alongside who has the same sort of not only vision that I do in regards to how this team should look like moving forward, but has the patience and the confidence in what we're doing as well. And he's got to be commended for that, because not all owners would have had that same level of patience at that moment in time. And so I have to thank Clint for his support. At that time in the year, and we sort of stayed true to our youth development policy that we have in place, and developing the team for what it is as it is at the moment, because it's all about the longer term future that we're looking at. And I'm pleased we stuck true to that, and it proved dividends for us in the end. So but I think that's probably the key reason why we managed to turn it around. I do think there was an element of the penny dropping. I've said that before in previous interviews. I just feel that the group were able to understand at that point what was needed. I think maybe there could be an element of the fact that I think going into that week where we had Featherston, Whitehaven and Halifax, I sat down with my coaching staff and we looked at obviously where we were currently at and how many sort of probably wins we would need to be able to break into the top six. Probably felt that maybe 32 points was going to be the kind of mark. And it was probably a case of, with the fixtures that we had remaining, that there was always a chance we'd slip up in the final fixtures. I knew we'd have to get on an incredible run to make the six. But we looked at those three fixtures and thought, well, we're going to have to win 2 out of these three, I believe, if we're going to make the top six. So we sort of built that week up as a bit of a series, a little bit like the State of Origin series, where you've got 3 games in that contest, and to win it, you've got to win 2 out of the 3. Unfortunately for us, we only won 1, which was the Halifax game on the final game, and then obviously from that point on, we probably didn't have any discussions about the top 6 as a coaching staff, as a group. We never spoke a lot about that at the start of the year anyway. I've never sort of set those targets this year on this group. I thought it would have been unfair to, because I knew we were going to have a level of disruption and be a bit disjointed this year with everything that's gone on, with the change of me coming in, the effect that would take and the time it would take for it to affect that change. But also, obviously with the pieces having to be moved around so often. Didn't expect it to last as long as it did, but I knew there would be a level of that. So we had sort of other aims and focuses as a group that we wanted to achieve this year, not necessarily a target of we need to finish here, we need to finish there. We never really spoke too much about that. But I think after that week where we had 3 games in 7 days and we didn't sort of achieve winning the series, our kind of mindset and our focus then shifted a little bit more on us. Whereas I feel probably leading up to that, we've probably got the balance of sort of focusing on the opposition to a degree, focusing on us as well, a bit of a more of a balanced sort of preparation going into games, whereas we sort of then shifted more towards us and just more focusing on us our individual performances as well as our collective team performances. And I think maybe there was an element of that pressure was off, because albeit I've never put any pressure on my players in terms of where we had to finish, and that there probably has been a little bit of external pressure in terms of this fan expectation, maybe media expectation that we should be a top six club because we finished in the top six last year. So maybe the players subconsciously had a little bit of that on their shoulders, and then maybe with the reality of that's looking highly unlikely now, maybe allowed them to sort of just relax a little bit more, and maybe and the fact that we did spend a bit more focusing on us, it seemed to help, and I can't put my finger exactly on it, but I think those sort of elements played their part, and then we got on a tremendous run as we saw. But what a great experience, more so for our younger players within that group, to sort of go through a process of losing a number of games and having to bounce back and again having to be relied upon. Let's not forget. In an ideal scenario, you want to blood your younger players, pick the right types of games for them. Put them in at the right times with established players around them to look after them. But for a lot of weeks, we were relying on those young guys to carry the brunt of our performances. So for them to sort of experience what they did in the early and mid-part season, especially that mid-part when we had a real tough run of, I think we had all the top 3 or 4 teams, plus League and the Challenge Cup. So that was an incredibly tough period. But to compete in all those games in the level that we did, yes, we may not have got the results, but we had a level of effort, and the way we competed in those games was tremendous. And then to come through the other side and then learn how to win in that final third of the season, that's only going to bode well for them in the future. So, but yeah, that's kind of my sort of take on that.
You touched obviously on the fact that obviously had to play players out of position, had to rely on youngsters. Obviously, the injury situation didn't seem to relent all year really. No. Have you learned anything, from that experience in terms of the way you go about things with injuries and training? Or I know when we spoke before, you said a lot of the time it is, contact injuries or injuries that aren't, making you rethink about how, whether you're under training or overtraining. What have you learned from this year about that sort of that process really, going into 2024? Yeah,
obviously, mate. Well, look, we obviously sit down, and we will be sitting down as a group now in the close season, certainly the performance staff, and we'll be looking at, at the sort of type of injuries we've sustained and why we sustained them. I think, just on a general basis, majority of those injuries were sustained in games, and they were contact injuries. So probably a little bit unfortunate. I don't think there's much you can do from a training point of view that would have prevented those injuries. If a bloke gets his foot stuck in the mud on a pitch and gets hit from the side and he does his knee, that's what happens. A bloke goes, makes a tackle, does his shoulder, that's what happens. A bloke dives on a loose ball, cops a knee to the ribs and breaks his. They're things that you can't really avoid. So, certainly as a performance team, if we had a high number of soft tissue injuries, then we have to have a look and question, our training methods. Are we overtraining them or undertraining them? If we're getting a number of like hamstring tears, quad tears, calf tears, soft tissue-based injuries, you question the program. But for the large part of this year, majority of them were contact-based injuries that occurred in games. The odd contact-based injury occurred at training. I probably feel we weren't able to do as much like physical contact work as much this year at training because we didn't have the numbers, and I couldn't risk that. I couldn't risk losing bodies because of that. And I remember, I won't forget, I remember one week we did actually have a few bodies back, and I lost James Cunningham with a head knock at training, and he missed the next game because we were able to do a bit more contact work, so I had a few more bodies. So, but I think what I've learned though through this year is I've learned a little bit more about my players, about their character, and how they've responded to adversity and the challenges. And the frustrations of not being able to get a settled side out there, because I know even as a player myself, you want to be starting to build combinations with certain players, certainly in your spine, and as a back rower you want the same halfback to be running off, and as a centre you want the same fullback out the back that you're working with, and you want to build those combinations, and we never had that luxury. You had to move the chess pieces all over the place this year. We've had so many different people playing different roles. Back rowers playing centre, back rowers playing halfbacks. front rowers playing in the back row. We've had wingers playing fullback. We've had wingers playing centre. We've had all sorts going on. So, but I feel probably the most I've learnt is about the character of my players, which for the large part's been very good. In terms of the injury stuff, we certainly will have a look at if there's anything we can do differently at training that may prevent that. But I think we've just been really unfortunate. I think when you look at the large part of most of the injuries have been medium to long term. We've never had that like, he's had a bit of a knock to the knee, it's a sprain, or he's out for 1 to 2 weeks. It's all been sort of 6 to 8 weeks out, 8 to 12 weeks, 12 to 16, or season-ending injuries. So it has been unprecedented. I've never dealt with anything before like it in my history as a player or a coach. I've been part of teams where you may have had 8 to 10 out, but it would have lasted a month, 6 weeks, not pretty much the whole season. So so it's been a tough one that way, but we will learn some lessons from it, and hopefully next season will be better for that experience.
Just before we come on to looking ahead to 2024, obviously just wanted to touch on the Challenge Cup run as well, as you alluded to. First time getting to the quarter-final since 2004, obviously culminated in that game against Lee, and obviously, leading after 60 minutes, I think it was, against the team that obviously went on to win the Challenge Cup. How proud are you were you of that run in the Cup and that performance against Lee? Yeah,
well, I thought the Challenge Cup, was a really, I suppose, a good time for us as a group. And I thought our performance levels in the Challenge Cup over the large part were very, very good. I thought we created some memorable moments. I mean, I look at the round 4 clash against Sheffield here at home. It's one of the best games I've been involved in as a coach or a player. To say that we really come out the blocks that day. We executed the game plan really well. As a coach, it was just beautiful to watch. That everything we practiced at training, we were putting on, executing it, making really good decisions, and we were 20-0 up in the first 20 minutes. And then we lose Danny Kermond, unfortunately sent off on the 30-minute mark, and then the pressure then we were under, because Sheffield at that time were running red hot in the championship. I think they just come off the back of beating Toulouse, pumping them, and they were in really good form. They were sitting, I think, second or third at the time. And obviously coming to us with a lot of confidence. We go down to 12 men and we're playing against one of the best attacking teams in the championship. And I'm thinking, oh, goodness me, this will be a test of character and resolve defensively. And the way that we defended with 12 men for 50 minutes, was remarkable. And it was just such a memorable moment for me this year. I'm sure it was for the fans. But I thought that was, that was a game that stood out in the Challenge Cup. And then obviously to reach the quarter-final and perform in the way that we did against Lee, again, was incredible. I mean, we had 16 fit players going into that game. I had to ring around a few contacts of mine, and I ended up getting a hold of John Duffy at Wigan, and I said, look, can you lend me a couple of kids? Because most clubs didn't want to risk, certainly Super League clubs, because they don't want their players cup tied. And no championship clubs were really they were playing that weekend, so they weren't going to risk sending any players. So I ended up, John Duffy did me a favour. I've known John for a long time, and he sent me a couple of reserve grade players, and Adam Jones and Regan Sumner, and they literally had 2 training sessions and were both in the team on the Sunday, and acquitted themselves well, along with the other players that played that day. But we needed them so we could field 18 players for the game, and the way that we performed that day was remarkable. Like, I mean, to say where we were, in the position that we were, and I'm telling you, I think if Connor Fitzsimmons scores at that moment, he got held short an inch from the line. If he scores there, we'd probably go 20-4 up, and I think we'd probably go on and win the game. And that was the game changer for me, that moment. Fitzy doesn't score, and then play 2 of the next defensive set would give a penalty away in yardage. They kick downfield. I think then they get a repeat set, they get some field position, and then the momentum sort of then started to change. They sort of got a little bit of confidence after scoring, and then it was kind of, we just couldn't wrestle that momentum back. But, in terms of the performance itself and the effort, to say where we were as a group at that stage too, let's not forget, we weren't going into that game off the back of 4 or 5 wins in the championship. We'd coming off the back of that with 4 or 5 losses in the championship. So confidence was probably not at its highest, But that's one thing I will say about this group, and what I found with this group is, even though we weren't winning games at that point, I don't think they ever doubted that they couldn't perform to a certain level, or we couldn't get those results. They never gave in like that. I never felt that our players were ever like, oh, this is just not going to happen. We're never going to be able to get wins. We're never going to, they understood that. Well, yeah, we're doing it tough. but they kept working extremely hard, both at training, away from training. They never gave in, and then, like you said, that we bore, we bore the results of their labour, in the final third of the season. So, but that was definitely an incredible game. I absolutely loved it. I know the fans would have enjoyed that one, and I tell you what, if we'd have won that game, that would have been special. That would have been a special one, but it was great nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely. Just looking ahead to 2024 then, how excited are you about that campaign? Obviously, like you said, this will be the first year you'll have had, with that proper pre-season in place, and obviously, first chance of yourself to have an off-season to bring in your own players as well. How much are you looking forward to next year?
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I mean, look, like I said at the start of this interview, this year for me, when I went with me coming in late in the day and all the other bits and pieces we had to contend with, I never set real sort of, targets on where we wanted to finish, and that there were certain focus areas as a team that I wanted us to deliver, and execute. And I think we've done that this year. So the aim that I had for this team for 2023, what I wanted them to look like and what I wanted them to deliver this season, I think we did. So that gives us now that foundation, for what we set for next year. And our aim next year will be higher and a lot different to what it was this year. All right. But it was important that we tick that box in 2023, and I felt we did that. So I'm excited about now building off the back of that to move forward into 24 and try and achieve the sort of areas of targets and aims that we set ourselves in 2024. We'll obviously be doing that with a larger squad and a deeper squad. We should have around 30 to 32 players next season, which I think is important. I think we used in total 35 this year with all the players that we brought in on loan throughout the year. I think it was a total of 35 players we ended up using. So I do feel we need a squad of that size. The owner agreed, which was great. So again, it's going to be a mixture of youth, established players and older players. I think we'll have a good balance to the squad once again. The majority of this season's team, will obviously be with us next year, so we keep that bit of that continuity with the playing group. A large number of them were already on 2 to 3 year deals anyway before I came, so they are still part of that journey and that process. We've retained a number of other players that were off contract to stay on the journey with us, and then we've recruited some players in areas that I feel we needed to have a little bit more strength in depth and a bit more quality in those areas. So if we do, hopefully not, have another unprecedented injury crisis like this year, we've got a little bit more strength in depth and quality to ease the pressure and the burden on the squad for next season with the amount of games that we potentially will be playing.